at Baltimore. It doesn't get any better than that. The expectations for Baltimore are incredibly high, of course. And for the Lions, after coming off that Chicago game, it's time to just remind everybody what we're all about. Last time we saw Baltimore, of course, it didn't go well. Had a lot of easy breakdowns defensively, gave away too many explosives. Then offensively, we fell in a hole at the very beginning of that game. Too many negatives, and we tried to climb ourselves out, but there was literally no chance at that point. Much different team in 2023 early in that season. But today we're going to dive into both sides of the ball. I'm going to give my score prediction at the end. I'm going to start off first with the Lions' offensive approach into this game, what I'm expecting, what I'm looking for the Lions to have some offensive success. Now, let me just lay this out there from jump. I think the Lions are going to take a much different approach. I don't know if I want to even call it different, but I think they're going to take a very strategic approach in how they feel they're going to have to play this game. I could be wrong, but my estimation is the Lions are going to feel like they need this game to be lower scoring. Being on the road, this can't be a game that gets away from them very early. This is a Baltimore team that is built so well to play with the lead. Defensively, they're going to take the football away. It's hard to get shots down the field against this team consistently. So for that reason, I think they're going to do what they can to keep this lower scoring, play a very smart game, lean into their strength of this game, which is we might be able to run better than Baltimore in this game and win time of possession that way, understanding we're going to have to play maybe a slower, more methodical offensive game, taking some of the underneath passes similar to what it was against Green Bay in week 1, and understanding that defensively, we can't give up the big explosives and then turn back around and allow that to be the case. And I say that because Baltimore in a lot of ways reminds me of the Green Bay type of defense and what they do. For example, on first down, while there is a lot of disguise within their defense similar to Green Bay, especially when they get you in passing situations, I think they're one of the best disguise teams in football. Last time we saw Baltimore, there was countless occasions where we just didn't have a blitz pickup. A simulated pressure would be an issue. Here comes the cornerback. Here comes the slot blitz. And they do that so well at such a high level. They disguise it so well. It's very difficult to pick up on, and it can very quickly lead to negative plays. I also think they're a very well-rounded back end. Now, with Marlon Humphrey able to play in the slot, Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, I think has been good so far this season. And then on the outside, what they have with Chidobe Awuzie opposite of Nate Wiggins, who has looked really strong to this part of the season, that whole back end is tough. And then you throw Roquan Smith into the mix, which is one of the most dynamic linebackers in football that just flies all over the place. Young Teddy Buchanan is next to him. This is a team that is really tough to just pick on certain matchups specifically, okay? You don't really have a ton of those outside of, to me, getting some potential for receiver packages, getting a guy like TJ Tampa on the field, and then trying to maybe find a couple of those occasionally. St. Brown against Marlon Humphrey as he's working in the slot is the Lions' best matchup on paper. We'll talk about that here more in a second. It's going at Chidobe Awuzie. The point is, I don't think they're bad anywhere in the back end. I don't think they're the best everywhere. I don't think they're bad anywhere. But that style to me is very similar. They'll play a lot of top-down coverage, a lot of cover 3 buzz, as Dan Campbell mentioned after that Packers game, which is where they're going to keep everything in front of them. Kyle Hamilton is one of the most rangy safeties in football. Of course, he's super long, but when he rolls down into the hook curl zone in a buzz situation, he covers so much ground. He makes it very difficult for you offensively to, he'll find the route and he'll take it away. That's where he starts to kind of force that check down game underneath. And that's something I think the Lions are going to have to be willing to take in this game, because I think that seeing week 1, it wouldn't shock me, especially after seeing week 2 of Baltimore's like, hey, we're keeping everything in front of us in this game, and the creativity is going to be up front. That's where we're going to get simulated pressure. That's where we may bring a defensive back. We're going to try to create a negative like that in early downs, but nothing's going to get behind us. Most of the time, that's where you see all of their cover 4 from what I had charted early this season, even go back to last time we saw this team. Most of the time when they play quarters, it's on first down. Some cover 1 in there, and a lot of times it's off man coverage. So again, you still have to kind of attack in front of those covered spots for them defensively, which means like speed outs, slants, things that cornerbacks can break on, of course, but that's where you have to be very efficient on time. This year, where a guy like Jamison Williams, last time we utilized him, we just weren't that efficient with him. Went at him a couple of times, didn't complete either of those early in that game. This is where you expect it to be much more consistent. Look at Khalif Raymond. He's a guy that has typically done really well against that kind of coverage, against off-man coverage. So you look at him on early downs and potentially open some things up for us. And another matchup the Lions tried to look at was on 3rd and long, Sam Laporta against Kyle Hamilton. I do think that pure man coverage, he's not elite. I think he's great at a lot of things. I don't think he's elite there. So if you can get him straight up matched up with Hamilton, as tough as it's still going to be, that is a matchup that on paper you could see a slight advantage for you and try to take advantage of that. Plus, keep in mind, Baltimore doesn't really play base package from what I've seen. They play a lot of nickel. So even if you come out in 12 personnel, they're probably still going to match with nickel, which takes you back to the ultimate point and ultimate goal of, hey, we got to be able to run the football, especially if we can get this slot on the field when we have 2 tight ends. We have to be able to run the football. We have to be able to pick that guy up and move some bodies up to the next level, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But that's also where I got the Tampa 2 look, which is, again, keeping kind of everything in front of them. them specifically. We see corner routes can be effective with that. We saw Harold Fannin had a nice corner route grab when he got behind Marlon Humphrey in zone coverage, where you're able to kind of clear out and hit the seam. That's an option. That's a real option against this team in those spots, but I think you have to be willing to take what's underneath, maybe even hit some early screens to just try to get out ahead of things. Now, when you get in a second down situation, I think this is where you have to be much more worried about them truly just blitzing and bringing extra bodies in these spots. They want to push you back. It was weird. From the amount of plays that I went through, I didn't have any second and short designations. It was all second and medium and second and long. So clearly their strategy works. It makes you second and medium. You're not playing a second and short game. The best way to do that is seemingly run the football well. That way you can play that game and potentially throw out of those spots. Strategy works and makes sense. That's where you get a little bit more cover six that starts to get involved. They may bracket in your best on second and medium / second and long, where you're trying to go to that go-to piece. If Amon-Ra's on the outside, you may get a little of that as well. Again, it's top down on the backside, so you can kind of work off that, try to get things in front of them, and then that pushes you to a third down situation. And again, this is where all the creativity comes into play. The quarters, the cover three buzz, Tampa 2 disguise looks, a lot of disguises. They'll mix in some cover one here with a robber. Maybe they'll blitz out of it, right? And this is where they find really good depth. They play the sticks very well underneath between Roquan, Kyle Hamilton. One key for me is heavy play action. And I think you have to look at it in this game and try to really sell it, because I think it can be effective. It absolutely can. I think you can get Teddy Buchanan to step down and lose his eyes a bit. But if that's the case, and if he does start to bail, that's where your check down becomes effective. Speaking of, Malachi Starks in the back end, right? If they're playing that quarters coverage and they're kind of keeping things in front of them, and Kyle's a guy sliding down cover three, put him in a bind, right? That's a player that I think you want to attack his eyes. You want to look him off. We saw a great seam touchdown earlier this season in the red zone in a quarters look where he didn't break on the football. Things like that, right? Make that guy process quickly, put him in the action. And of course, if you can put Buchanan in the action in space, I would prefer to do that, the linebacker out of Cal as well. So I think that's kind of what you're in for here. Now, rushing the football, to me on paper, the biggest positive is this should be successful for you. You should have a positive game here, and I think you should come in with the expectation we're going to run the ball better than Baltimore does. Forget what the thought process is on paper. We should. And to me, it's because, number one, outside of Justin Matabike, who is to me the key to finding success, I don't think they're great up front. I mean, Travis Jones has been good so far this year. I don't think Broderick Washington's been that great. The edge position, especially without Kyle Van Noy, is not overly stout as a run defense. I think Tavarius Robinson, I'm saying his name wrong, right? Tarvarius Robinson, I don't know how to say his name, but that guy on the edge, he's been effective as a run defender, getting upfield, creating some knockback. Just heavy personnel, I'd go heavy play action out of it. I do that to get them in nickel and see if they're willing to match base, because if they're not, great, we're running at you. And then I would still go back to that stretch scheme that you used already this season, right? Where you're just getting on the move, you're climbing to the next level. You can go directly at Roquan. You could try to connect to him before he's able to shoot up a gap on the backside and jump from the backside and create a negative or a TFL or a gap scheme where he kind of just beats you to the point. Regardless, you want to get hands on Roquan very early in this game because he's slippery and he plays so fast. So you'll have to be aware of that. The wider out you string plays, you'll have to be aware of that because he's a guy that just creates negatives on his own, inside zone, dual run plays. Those two things seem like they're going to be effective as well. And I would also even look to some sweep runs. Those seemingly be effective where you get out very wide, you get two pulls, you can potentially crash down their end, you can get upfield on some of those speed edge rushers, climb them out of the play with your receivers. And I would also look, to maybe run a reverse off of that. We've seen a team do it this year, have 9 yards. I think that was Cleveland that ended up doing that. A couple things in coverage I'm keeping an eye on. When they go Tampa 2, because especially on third down, you'll see this and they'll disguise out of it and there's a lot of moving parts. One, I don't love the consistent idea of just high-lowing it because typically they play the sticks really well. So it's very difficult to just find windows when they know what they have to protect. They're going to play top down. They're going to make you go up and get it. So they're going to make you catch and run to all those opportunities. So I don't necessarily love that. I think, one, you attack the middle of the field again, and you try to find a way to clear out that linebacker, maybe a high-low there, something that can clear that backer, Yuzgov's eyes. Also really like the idea of the whip routes. The Lions implemented this a little bit last time they played Baltimore with like backside whip routes. I like it a lot because it tends to clear out their coverage. They're playing top down, so you get a lot of catch run opportunities when you work in one zone to another and someone starts to bail out to go find other work. I think it's a great opportunity to set that up. I also think it's a great opportunity to hit a double move in this game. Anything that's top down, especially on early downs, and you're selling heavy play action, double move, like all the way. That should be a setup in this game. It should be expected that you at least try one of those in this game. The deep curls didn't seem very effective. If you're going to work up to these defenders and break back to the ball, don't just sit on a deep curl, right? Run the deep comeback routes, run a deep out route that peels back to your quarterback. Give him a step away from that cornerback specifically. And again, go at TJ Tampa if you can get him on the field specifically. But you must work to peel out these linebackers over the middle of the field, whether that's taking your check down, heavy play action underneath, misdirection up front. You have to try to peel those guys from just living over the middle of the field all game long.
And so clearly, I like the idea of going at Chidobe Awuzie. Here you get a cover 6 look, so it's just a one-on-one back shoulder deep pass that's Collier. And then on the next look, you get this off-man coverage look. But remember, they play off-man. They do a really good job of spacing in bunches and clusters, but they also do create a lot of space because of the spacing they play with. So it does open opportunities to separate at the top of the route.
We discussed this Baltimore Ravens defense. One thing that continues to get stuck in my mind is which player is going to hit the over. If you want to get involved on the action this year, MyBookie is the perfect place to do so for all your player props, lines, spreads, in-game live odds, all under one roof. MyBookie is the spot for you. I personally love building out parlays. So for me, I'm typically looking for the over-unders on individual players and trying to find the players that I think have the best matchup in said week. And I know for this week specifically, looking at this Baltimore defense, I look for who could be matched up on Chidobe Awuzie as we walk through this. One guy I'm keeping my eye on is a guy like Khalif Raymond, for example, who hit his over this past week on literally one reception. Or a guy like Sam Laporta, who the Lions targeted Kyle Hamilton on a big third down early last time they faced Baltimore. The great thing about MyBookie is that if you're new to MyBookie, you use our code and any bet you choose up to $500 is fully covered. Make your play, and if it doesn't hit, you get it right back when you opt in using your bet back bonus token. So there's no better time to jump into the action. Get in on the action now with MyBookie. Use code DOSE, and let's continue the video. In terms of pass rush, Odafe Owe to me is been the biggest threat on paper outside of Matabike, but on the edge especially, he's the guy to circle for this one. And then also, again, Marlon Humphrey as a matchup. He's a lot of 139 pass rating. He's probably going to see a lot of St. Brown. I don't think he's a bad corner, but I think that's what he's going to see a lot of. J-Mo should be more successful. If he gets Chidobe Awuzie, you have to attack that. You have to. I think Awuzie struggles with that kind of speed. But the flip side is Nate Wiggins is very good. If Nate Wiggins is on J-Mo, then he may not be noticeably as effective. So that number 3 receiver, the Khalif Raymonds, that should absolutely be able to separate on Chidobe. The Tesla, who's much bigger than Chidobe. That's the kind of guy that needs to step up in that spot. I flip it around to the other side of the ball. This year, Baltimore has been noticeably very reliant on Lamar Jackson taking off and running, but it's still a big element of their offense. Third and short, zone reads start to come into play. It's very noticeable. Zay Flowers is massive part of their offense, and he's the guy that they go to, and Mark Andrews is in the red zone. Like, those are 3 things that are very noticeable. Of course, they're going to lean on Henry, and there's a lot of heavy personnel they play. A lot of traditional single back, maybe some pistol. They're going to go downhill. They're going to work with heavy personnel, and they're going to run out of it with Henry. The key to that is, number one, it's very difficult to play a game without having a safety in the box. So you kind of get limited, it feels like, up front with a game that you have to play. But if you just look at it last week, they weren't very effective running the ball at all. Cleveland was aggressive upfield. The keys for me were the trap runs, because those create explosives, and they had one explosive, I would call it explosive, on that, and also the pin pull plays. I would assume that they're going to use that a lot. And I say that because we got beat on it multiple times last week against Chicago, right? These pin pull, getting to the outside, 2 pull leads. That thing gave us problems last week. There's no doubt that Baltimore is going to say we're doing the exact same thing. Make sure you can set the edge. Make sure your linebackers can get outside and set an edge, right? Derek Barnes is now back. Well, he played last time we played this team, but we were banged up to the point where Jack Campbell went on the ball. So you should have your traditional Barnes on the line of scrimmage, Alex and Jack. That's a much better spot than you were last time you played this team. So for that reason, you have to find a way to better set the edge when they get outside, because it just wasn't good enough last week. And Baltimore, I assume, is going to go directly at that until you prove you can stop it. The jet runs are a big part of their offense.
Specifically, it's a counter for them to slow down that upfield attacking defensive front against the run.
And they'll set up options out of it, but most of the time it's Zay Flowers. And again, the zone reads become mostly impactful in short yard situations. Outside of that, you didn't feel it as much, but short yard situations, you kind of could assume, all right, it's either a rollout or some sort of zone read, like some sort of option is going to be attached here for Lamar Jackson. I mentioned from jump, I think one of the overall keys for this game is you can't play one side of the ball where you understand that they're going to be tough to get easy shots downfield and flip around and allow them to create explosives. The problem is it's really tough to deal with explosives when you constantly have to play with one deep safety. So it is something that you have to keep in mind. And if the Lions are trying to play 2 deep safeties, or at very least invert out of it, so maybe you show one safety in the box, you roll them down, and at the snap you bail out, just so you can try to have a little bit more support against the run. If you're playing that game, I think in theory, it makes a lot of sense, because you're going to make them play the long drive. So many of their big explosives are created through just broken plays, right? Not even somebody necessarily getting open. It's just there's a broken play. It extends way too long, and Lamar just finds somebody heaving it downfield. So I think if you're going to play that game, they have to marry on both sides of the ball. But one thing like we saw Buffalo do last week is once they got attacked on the seams, they started to go to match coverage so that you couldn't have the seams anymore. And that peels out. That creates underneath passes. That's where you start to feel like, oh, man, okay, a screen would be very effective here. Well, for Baltimore offensively, we see some of that, right? We see early down screens, tunnel screens very early, heavy play action from them as well. And a lot of the same concepts kind of over and over. A lot of over routes offensively, a lot of that Zay Flowers just running away from coverage, tied with the deep dig route. You get a lot of deep corner routes as well attached to what they do. Those three routes seemingly make up a lot of who they are offensively, and those three explosive looks. And look, last time we saw Baltimore, that's what they did. One of their early explosives was very simple. We went to cover three, spot dropping cover three, and that's all they did was they hit an over route with a backside dig. So when our safety steps down on the first route, the over route, the corners bail out to deal with the vertical shot. All of a sudden, this deep dig route just gets behind the backers and he's wide open. So fundamentally speaking, number one, your free safety has to be aggressive, because then later in that game he was hesitant, he didn't dive. So because he didn't dive, another thing was open. So he has to either one, be aggressive to just take away that first route, and then we'll deal with the opposition of it, or you have to tell him that you're staying the deepest of the deepest, and we're going to have our cornerbacks pass it off, and we're going to sit on the outside. You have to play one of those two games, but there can't be an in between. I expect them to be aggressive with their free safety. So I believe one thing that's important is the linebackers have to find routes, right? I think it's okay to make them play that game as well. Make your linebackers find routes. Don't just drop into area and stand there. We understand that your first read step is going to take you to the ball because you're playing run first, but ultimately it's why I think that as much as it's scary to play man against a team like this, the Lions will probably lean very heavy cover three like they did last time. Maybe look to match, right? Maybe look to match coverage a little bit. Don't just allow deep over routes. Don't just allow crossing routes to be a thing. Match this coverage, right? Don't put your free safety in a bind. I would look at matching coverage a little bit more consistently in this game, especially when you put some of those cover three looks, so you can try to get a little bit of best of both, where your eyes are into the backfield until that thing declares vertical. Then I'm just going to match it downfield, because I think spot dropping can kill you. And then also on the flip side is just playing man across the board. In theory, it should be much more difficult to play the run that way, though it's teams that seemingly had some success when playing that game. Now, if you are just playing, again, straight cover three, one thing they like to do as well is those deep out routes on the outside. They play the field side. A lot of times it's Zay Flowers 101. Last time we played this team, deep out route, short out route. It was just a killer. It was very basic routes that they were separating on. And I mean, we should be better with DJ Reed. I think DJ Reed should follow and see a lot of our guy Zay Flowers in this game, because he's clearly priority one. Bateman's good. Bateman runs a lot of those deep curl routes that has a little bit of nuance to it, which is tough to deal with, especially in man coverage 101. They put him out way wide. But Flowers is the main key. I'd put Reed on him, and I'd just be like, hey, stay with this guy essentially everywhere he goes. That'd be my mindset coming into this game, because then you can still match out of it. But whatever, that's how I would look at going at this. But I also like being aggressive. I do like attacking this team. I like blitzing this team. I like cover one against this team. Can make the tight window throw. You can have success. You can have him misfire, not allowing him to think broken play in the back of his mind and thinking, I got to put this ball out there and see if my guy can go win. And this is one of those games where it's truly a battle of, hey, your cornerbacks need to be good. Like, it's straight up, this is why you pay DJ. This is why TA's here. Meek, be good this week. Like, don't get cooked all over the place. We need you this week to be effective. Like the corner routes as well. Tez Walker has been a big piece for them vertically. He's been a deep corner shot piece. And when they get man coverage, they do a nice job with stacks and trying to release out of that. So you just need to be communication sound. You can't just drop guys off and then leave them. That's one thing they do. Their routes are not as like straight to the book, like here's an in route. There's a lot of rounding. There's a lot of kind of nuance to them and a little bit more detail where they round off routes pretty well to create some separation. One of the most interesting balances the Lions will have to find, if they can get them to second and medium and second and long situations, and that's the game they're able to play, how aggressive do they get? Because I think clearly based on last week, heating them up was beneficial. Cover one blitz, cover zero. That was beneficial for Cleveland by far. The problem is you want to play that game risking the fact that you could give that explosive up. I think it's more dangerous to sit back. Paper, our front four is going to get plenty of wins in this game. So I think it's going to be very capable, where between Andrew Voorhees, Tyler Linderbaum, who hasn't looked great so far. Voorhees looked like a mess at left guard in pass pro. Daniel Falalele, who hasn't looked great in pass pro. Like, when you just look at the interior of that offensive line, even Ronnie Stanley has been outstanding. They haven't performed that well. Now, between Reeder and Tyleek and Wingo, do we get enough juice where that feels overwhelming? I don't know. But I can tell you, Roy Lopez, I can tell you that hasn't looked great. So I do believe that a four-man rush will give you some wins. And it can open up the door where second and long, they can play their Tampa 2 games, right? They can keep things in front of them. They can play their 3 buzz. They can do things like that. But you're going to see, number one, a lot of mesh concepts. A lot of it's, hey, they're going to chip your edge rusher. They're going to slow down Hutch with the receiver or the tight end, and they're going to run mesh out of that. And a lot of times, again, it's going to be Zay Flowers. It's typically involved in an action. He's going to run the shorter route in the mesh, the shorter drag, and he's typically going to get the ball from run after catch. So it's a lot of that. If you settle back, it feels like it's a lot of catch and run. And if you don't settle back in terms of you're matching up or you're just in man coverage across the board, that's when they're going to take their shots. And it's a risky game to play because it obviously can give up explosives. The 3 match gives up explosives. But that said, I do think that it's been effective, and we saw it last week, to bring extra bodies and match up in the back end. And we had more positive results, sacks, incomplete passes. The broken play kind of went out the window a bit because, like, okay, I can extend the play, but there's nowhere really to go when they're bringing 6 guys or 5 or 6 guys, and we're not blocking that well up front. So the blitz feels more impactful. Derrick Henry doesn't look elite in pass pro either. You got to make that be impactful. So I think second medium, second and long, while it feels like it's contradictory to what I was saying, I do think it makes sense to heat them up. And if they get you on 1 or 2, I mean, hopefully not. Broken plays have been the big playmaker for them, and we saw that this past week. So I do believe that the explosives can be on the table at that point, but I think it's also proven out to be effective to speed up Lamar in those spots, not really make the broken play become a thing, test their timing, test their accuracy in tight window throws. And I think we have the DBs on paper to play that kind of game without thinking that we're doing too much. They are going to need yards. You're going to get a lot of those level concepts, a lot of the over routes. So you're going to get guys trying to run away from others. Obviously, there can be windows created from that when you're just chasing players across the field. In the red zone, again, I think you have to match because they use Mark Andrews in the slot, so he becomes a threat to go vertical. Now you have to match up from the seams. Otherwise, he's going to get his separation. But I think that's an okay game to play. You just have to get there. And the Lions should have more success up front bringing extra bodies in this game. It's just that balance the Lions are going to have to play. I think in general, you would obviously want to keep it mixed up. We got a sack and cover 4 this year against Baltimore. So I think in general, you'd want to keep that mixed up. I think the game plan of not allowing the big play to beat them is important, but I think that feels more important on early downs with their heavy play action than if you get them backed up behind the chains, where I think now it makes sense to kind of get after them a little bit. Speaking of some of the key routes that I saw, again, the digs on the backside, which can a lot of times be the second guy through, the deep post routes, corner routes, over routes, a lot of it's that. A lot of it feels like that. They know you're in man. They're going to run some switch releases, deep curls on the outside with Bateman, deep out routes or short out routes with Zay Flowers over coverage, right? Make them make some of those tighter window throws. Plastering and coverage is a must because of the broken plays. It's like you're playing Josh Allen last year. You have to plaster. You have to plaster in the red zone. Stop putting your eyes in the backfield as a DB. Find somebody and take him away. Brian Branch got beat on that last year. That can't be a thing. Find work if you're an underneath zone defender specifically. Find work in those spots. I expect them to go at Mark Andrews on Jack Campbell. I expect that's a matchup they're going to think they can take advantage of. And, of course, at the end of this all, it is a Casey Rogers game. It's a Casey Rogers game of, hey, you want to talk about keeping the quarterback contained? This is the biggest challenge you're probably going to have all year side of Josh Allen. So it's a great opportunity for the Lions to show what they're capable of there. And we've seen the recipe to you can keep him in the pocket. And the broken plays are honestly seemingly more of an indictment on what happens in the back end rather than what actually happens up front when he's creating plays, because he's not always looking to run. He looks to push downfield. To me, the challenge of containing Lamar is going to be short yard situations when the read option becomes much more accessible. I think you need those edge rushers to be very patient in those spots. That way he can't just take off, and you need that second level and safeties willing to step down and attack. You got to have your safeties willing to step in and attack, and then getting home with the blitz if you bring it, because you should be able to. And if that's not going to be the case, plastering in the back end. I think that's where it all kind of comes down to. So I think the Lions are going to view this as a game that they have to play differently if they're going to win. And I think for that recipe to work out, you're going to have to win a game like 20-17 on the road. And I think the Lions are very capable of doing that. Going to have negatives offensively. I already can guarantee that. You're probably going to turn the ball over once. It's just how it's going to go. So on the flip side, you can't get in a 14-0 hole, or you're in big trouble in this one. And I think the Lions realize that. So I think they're going to be understanding of that game that they have to play, which is, I think, what Dan Campbell's going to really focus on from jump. And I think on paper, they're a better rushing team than this team is. I think they can be a better rushing team than this team is. I think it's very possible based on the matchup. So lean into that. So with that, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Shout out to my bookie for sponsoring today's video. Use that code DOSE, and I'm out.